welcome to episode 14 of the Powerhouse podcast, where we bring to you the powerhouses of the mitochondrial world. I'm your host, Brian Harmon, President and CEO of the United Mitochondrial Disease Foundation, and joined after a month off, Phil. I think I gave you last month off. Dr. Phil Yeski is back with us. He's been a busy guy. Gave him a break from the podcast, and special guest, employee number one at UMDF, celebrating her 25th year at UMDF. Kara Strittmatter, our meetings and events, education support services director. Kara, excited to have you as a co-host with us today.
Thank you for having me. My first time.
I know you're being very sweet, because if there's anybody who's really busy right now, it's Ms. Strittmatter planning our world-class Mitochondrial Medicine Symposium, which we're going to get to. But Kara, I'd be remiss in the spirit of celebrating your 25 years here at UMDF, not just to kick things off today, to get some of your insights. I think our listeners would love to hear of just some of the things you've experienced over 25 years.
25 years. Started off in the basement.
Yeah, what does that mean? Explain that for our listeners, please.
That should be explained.
As the first employee, we did not have an office, so I worked out of Chuck Mohan's basement. And basically, we ran everything from there. And then eventually it grew and grew. But I find it interesting to see so many faces still part of the foundation that I'm still corresponding with. But those early years, I'll tell you what, Chuck was a driving force.
Yeah.
He kept us moving. He kept us connected. And really brought a lot of energy. And he was, of course, my first connection with UMDF. But I would say out of all these 25 years, it is the patients, the families, the medical community that really keeps me inspired, just by the research that's happening and the clinicians, and we have clinical trials now. And I get to see a lot of our families. We've lost a lot of loved ones, but we also have seen a lot of these kids grow up, and it's just, it's very empowering for me. And I enjoy coming to work every day, and I love building new programs to give them more resources. So a lot's happened in 25 years, but
Kara, I'll tell you, one of the most moving aspects for me, the 25th anniversary, we celebrated that last year. We had you on video talking about your time at UMDF, and you made a comment about seeing photos of graduation parties of our patients, and how much that has changed in these 25 years, and how inspiring that was. And boy, that really, it hit me hard to know the important work that we're doing. It comes down to more celebrations, right? More birthdays, more graduation parties, weddings, grandchildren, all of it, right? That's what we're here for. So it's always great to be reminded, and you bring so much perspective on that. And I can't wait to talk about all the good work that you're doing around Symposium with our guests today, but other great things happening. Phil, you've been a busy guy too. This is why I've given you a month off, because we've had really key programs kicking off here. And
I've been working, just to be clear.
You've been working, yes. Believe it or not, Phil doesn't just do the podcast once a month. He's got other things going on too. And one of the ones that, of course, we've been really excited about is this genetic testing project, which we're starting to put the bow on this pilot project. And I believe we're going to have some info to share at Symposium about the overall results of the project. Probably most importantly, though, is the families are starting to hear back on this project.
Yeah, really, really exciting. And I think we've talked about it before, right? It was probably 5 years ago when we developed this roadmap, right, for mitochondrial disease. It really had three silos to it. How do we improve the diagnosis of mitochondrial disease? How do we develop treatments and cures for mitochondrial disease patients? How do we optimize their clinical care as they're living with the disease? And this genetic testing program, is a really strong example of what we can do in that first silo to hopefully enable the second and the third silo. Because once we have patients that are well characterized, if they have a diagnosis, obviously that gives you better clinical care, because your healthcare provider knows exactly what it is, the disease that you're dealing with. But from a drug development point of view, it's absolutely critical that we understand both the genotype, meaning the kind of mutation that's causing your disease, as well as the phenotype, the kinds of symptoms. So that's what the patient registry helps to accomplish together with the genetic testing project. But yeah, here we are. The pipeline is full. We're not accepting additional submissions at this time. But we're really excited now to start to see the data come in. We know we're driving diagnoses. That part we're already seeing. And I'm really looking forward here over the next month or so leading up to symposium to rolling up the sleeves and digging into the data and seeing what other things we can glean out of this project. But it's a really exciting one.
Well, shortening that diagnostic journey, it certainly feels good for patient families who've been on that long struggle. And it feels good from a staff perspective too. Knowing that we're bringing some peace of mind to our patient community as well. Absolutely. So we'll be excited in symposium just to hear more about the overall results of that. And of course, the other big piece that we've been talking about for several months that's off to a meteoric rise and an excellent start is our Mitoshare patient registry. And I think it'd be good just to kind of pay off the initial launch here, Phil, and share a little bit with our community of what's going on with Mitoshare.
Yeah, really exciting to see the way the patient community has responded to this. We've launched a new patient populated registry. The idea here is that we're trying to find the patients, characterize the patients, capture their voice, their perspective, complementary data to what might be captured in clinical registries or in a clinical trial setting. All of these things are now underway. We're getting people on board, and there's much more to come, right? So this is really just the starting point of onboarding a couple of surveys to capture demographics and a little bit about their diagnostic status. But we really have a robust pipeline of additional surveys and studies and plans for the registry over time. So, I think our commitment to the community is that this will be very much a feedback loop. You share with us and make your data available to be used in an appropriate way for research. Our commitment and our promise is to provide back to you, here's how the data are being used and for what purpose, and here's what's being found. So this is a grassroots project. We need everyone to serve as an ambassador, if you will, to talk to other people and make the case for why this is a project they should be involved with.
You can find that information on umdf.org. It's right on our homepage. And Carrie, the other part of your job, you spent a lot on the education front, but the bevy of activity happening on the support side, these new programs, as we take hundreds of cases a month, it feels good to know that we're connecting families with these programs, and you're starting to see our community react to this as well.
Absolutely. They're excited. I mean, they've been waiting. It's like they've been waiting for this, and they're really excited to join the registry and find out all the tools that it has to offer too.
Well, of course, all these programs don't happen without the generous support of our community. And I think our community knows I'm a no-shame fundraiser. I'm proud that we're a fundraising organization. I'm proud we're a charity of choice for so many organizations. And you're going to start to see this hit email inboxes and mailboxes here. We're in the middle of our spring campaign, our Give Hope fundraising campaign, and encourage you all to follow us on social media. Check those emails out. Be sure to open up your mail. A really inspiring story of Jeremiah and his family, a TK2D patient who is on their own journey. And Mike, like many of our patients that we support, so many similarities that Jeremiah's family is facing with many of our families, and some special moments that they're sharing as well too. So encourage everybody to check out our Give Hope campaign. It helps power all these programs. It helps power the world-class symposium that we talked about earlier, an event that we've been running for how many years now, Kara, have we been doing symposiums?
Well, that UMDF has been running. I mean, it's been 21 years.
21 years. 21 years. So Kara's full career here, she's been in the symposium planning process.
22nd year us running it, yeah. It's funny because who we're going to talk to have come on camera, they were the first ones we started working with in 2001. 2000 was our first official UMDF symposium, but 2001 was the first collaboration. with the Mitochondrial Medicine Society and Mitochondrial Research Society. And these two gentlemen that we will be talking with were right there with me in the very beginning.
She's a natural at this.
I was just going to say, perfect segue. Give her the segues here. Awesome. It's not even in the script, Kara. Well done. Well, without further ado, I think we should bring in our guests, our 2022 MitoMed co-chairs, Dr. Bob Naviaux. Bob, thanks so much for joining us today. From the University of California, San Diego, and also from the University of California, San Diego, Dr. Richard Haas.
Hello.
Richard, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
We're delighted to have you on board. Kara gave a perfect segue. I wanted to talk about the history of our symposium, the history of mito education. I think we should start there. I'd love just to get your guys' insights.
Let me go back a little bit further, actually. So these symposia I'm just adding it up, started 37 years ago, actually. Wow. It was in 1995. Well, I guess that's 27 years ago, right? and then in 1998, we held the first one in San Diego, and after that, two others. Mostly they've been on the East Coast, but we've certainly been delighted to have people on the West Coast, and in this case, coming up in Phoenix, as you well know.
Yes, June 8th and 11th through 11th in Phoenix. Again, information on UMDF.org on that. Take us back a little bit. What was happening in mitochondrial disease research and education 27 years ago? Do we have enough time?
Well, it was a pretty vacant landscape, actually. These symposia were really important in terms of bringing the physicians and scientists involved with mitochondrial disease together. And the other kinds of meetings that doctors and scientists go to had very little discussion about mitochondrial disease. And that actually is one reason we started the Mitochondrial Medicine Society, Bob and I, so that we kind of had a home for mitochondrial disease. And as you point out, Kara, we've worked closely together for a lot of years now.
Yeah, so Dr. Haas, and I have been dreaming the dream of expanding awareness and training in mitochondrial medicine now since, the day we met, and him for a long time before that. I started as a fellow in biochemical genetics here at UC San Diego under Dr. Haas and William Nyan, and we had this dream that mitochondrial diseases are more common than are currently recognized. And so, we founded the Mitochondrial Metabolic Disease Center here at UC San Diego in 1996, and it's just taken off from there. I actually remember that 1995 symposium when I was a fellow. I sat next to Doug Wallace at the time, and we had a little conversation, about the endosymbiosis theory of the origin of mitochondria. So it started, auspiciously, and it just keeps growing from there.
So I know we have so many great things planned for 2022, and part of the reason why we wanted to have the two of you on today is to give an overview of some of the exciting programming that's going to be happening. And I'd love for you to kind of work us through the agenda a little bit from the research platform and program standpoint to help our viewers kind of better understand some of the great activity that's going to be happening.
Well, why don't I start with the Wednesday start day, really, which we do have a meeting of the mitochondrial group involved in the NIH study the day before, which is the North American Mitochondrial Disease Consortium. But the real platform starts on Wednesday, June the 8th. And the title of the first morning session is Directed Gene and Stem Cell Therapy, because we felt that it was really important to lead with this. This is where the future is. And we wanted to really explore what's going on at the moment in this arena. And fortunately, we have some internationally renowned researchers here at UCSD who have agreed to participate.
Excellent.
The first is Dr. Don Cleveland, who is the chairman of the Department of Cellular and Molecular Medicine here. And Don has made tremendous contributions in terms of the cause of ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and also Huntington's disease, two devastating disorders. And his focus in recent years has been on treatment of these diseases with viral-directed RNA and DNA treatments. And actually, we have one of those treatments that's now under trial here for ALS at UCSD in the Clinical Research Center. So this is bearing fruit. And he's really a world leader and a great speaker, and I think that's going to be a wonderful leadoff for us. The next speaker is from probably the major worldwide center in mitochondrial research, which is Newcastle in the United Kingdom. And Dr. Bobby Mcfarland is a professor there, of course. He's actually a pediatric neurologist, but like me and like a number of other physicians, was heavily involved in basic research and actually was running their diagnostic laboratory. And so he understands, the basic science extraordinarily well, but is also clinically adept, and he's also a great speaker. I think that's going to be a super session. What he's really going to be focusing on is the reproductive options for mitochondrial DNA disease. And Britain is in a unique position because they got the government basically to agree that mitochondrial DNA could be treated genetically with in vitro fertilization techniques and manipulation of the ova. So that'll be exciting. I think we're way away from that in the US for various reasons, but it is a treatment option for patients with these devastating disorders.
Yeah, and Richard, I think worth mentioning that Australia has now joined the UK in legalizing mitochondrial donation as well,
which is great, really great. And then the other major speaker we have is Dr. Moutry, Alison Moutry, who is a professor at UCSD as well. He's a basic science researcher, PhD, and he's really interested in brain development. So his focus is on organoids, but he does a lot of genetic manipulation. And I've heard some of his talks, which are really quite exciting, about things that he's been doing. For instance, putting DNA from Neanderthals into cell lines and looking at the development of organoids.
Interesting.
Trying to figure out the difference between, our predecessors and where we are now in terms of how the brain works. So that should be very exciting as well. And all of the focus of all of these really is obviously on gene therapy and gene manipulation, which really is the future, I think, for our mitochondrial patients.
And then in the afternoon, our friends at the Mitochondrial Medicine Society, the very group that you all started, we have their sessions as well too. And there's some exciting things planned on that front. Also, Wednesday, we start to kick off the abstract presentations. And I think it'd be good, Phil, Kara, maybe comment here a little bit on what an abstract presentation is for our viewers that may not be fully understand what happens in an event like this.
Yeah, I'm happy to describe the goal. Kara can talk about what it takes to pull it together, because it ends up being, right, sort of a big administrative process for the foundation. But it's a really important aspect, right? It recognizes that on a platform or a series of platforms, you only have so many opportunities for speakers and to present the latest information. But there's a lot more going on, right, in the whole research ecosystem. So, scientific conferences just have this long-standing history of poster sessions that run in parallel with the speaking platforms, where young scientists, experienced scientists can all gather and display where they're at with their projects. And it's very much a community process where you walk around, you can, read the poster, have a discussion with somebody representing the poster. A lot of good science and collaborations come out of poster sessions. Of course, we have those then as part of our conference, but importantly, we want to try to select those that represent really exciting work or fit really well with the platforms, a handful of those for oral presentations as well. And so I think this is where Kara and I work with the co-chairs, Dr. Haas and Dr. Naviaux in this case, to sort through the 100+ abstracts that are submitted and begin to rank them and slot them. And maybe the course co-chairs can kind of talk about that process this year. I think there were a lot of good submissions.
Well, the first thing I would say is that Phil was not really on vacation. Yes, we've had the opportunity to review the over 100 abstracts, and there's some really stunning science. I think what COVID has done is basically allowed people a lot of time to think about things that are important in terms of science, and now they have an opportunity to talk about it. And so I think this is going to be a really stellar meeting in that regard.
Well, I'm going to try to avoid puns about taking our science to greater heights, but I may not be able to resist, and I'll be able to pull you in here as we head into the Thursday programming. I'm personally excited to come in and sit in the sessions around mitochondria in space. I'm hoping you can share with our viewers a little bit of what's going to happen on Thursday for us.
Yeah, well, Brian, this is really an area that's near and dear to my heart. I actually think that mitochondrial dysfunction may represent the central biological challenge that we have with long-term space flight, and it acts like an invisible fence or an elastic tether that pulls ever stronger the farther we go out in space and more time we spend in microgravity. And by 6 months or so, every astronaut that has spent that amount of time in space comes back with mild to moderate and sometimes severe multi-system health effects that are ultimately traceable to mitochondrial dysfunction and to accelerated aging. It kind of underscores this connection between mitochondria and aging. And ultimately, I think that if we are collectively unable, if we can't solve the mitochondrial problem in space, then our exploration of the moon and the solar system and beyond will be curtailed. And so that's why it's so exciting. I mean, discoveries made by NASA and other exploration groups, now to solve this problem will have a profound therapeutic implications for patients here on Earth with primary forms of mitochondrial disease.
I think it's exciting too. There's just so much from a pop culture standpoint, in terms of what we're paying attention to as a society. There seems to be again a rise in activity around this. Phil, I don't see it now, but you used to have a rocket right behind your head.
Yeah, I think it's
we've had conversations with some of these NASA researchers. We have a member of our board who's connected with some activity that's happening in space, and that's what I'm excited about too. This is something that's really woven into the fabric of society right now. It's gaining a lot of steam, and to understand the critical role the mitochondria plays in here. And just a couple of things I've been hearing that some of our viewers may not have a full appreciation for. The role of mitochondria function, outside of mitochondrial disease. And I was hoping we could just comment on that here a little bit about some of the things that we may be discovering from a mitochondrial disease standpoint may help other disease states and unlocking answers. You already mentioned aging, the ultimately the one that gets all of us, right? Phil, you've shared that before, and how true. Maybe comment for us the role of these types of events, these educational efforts of unlocking some answers even outside of disease.
Yeah. So what I can say is that up in space, mitochondria have a problem regulating the natural fusion and fission, the dynamics that are a part of health on Earth, and they typically move toward more fragmented mitochondria that are less bioenergetically capable, and that leads to some problems over time that we'll have talks in this session on how that changes the eyesight of an astronaut, how it changes heart function and endocrine function, how it changes even blood flow and pressure in the brain, and also the how strong our tissues are that keep all our joints together. So sometimes when astronauts come back to Earth in 1G gravity, they'll have problems with things like that happen routinely, but more often under when they return to space, like for example, slip discs. So there are lots of things that range from those kinds of common things to issues about actually infertility and embryo development and implantation in space. That's something that also doesn't happen normally. So those are going to be all interesting topics, but ultimately relate to what many patients with primary mitochondrial diseases will feel as well. Brain, body, endocrine, metabolic effects of mitochondrial dysfunction, and those are things I really have high hopes that with the power behind NASA and the power behind some of the really wonderful scientists that are working on this from different angles, we're going to have some new solutions for patients.
Well, certainly a very exciting program. And Kara, I know we're planning on finding some ways at Symposium and, of course, after Symposium to help distill, digest this for the patient community as well, too. What we learned in the scientific sessions, what was shared in the scientific sessions, how we can translate that to our patient community as well, too.
Absolutely. Typically what we do is post-symposium is have a symposium synopsis where we'll bring some of our clinicians, researchers to speak to the families at Ask the Mito Doc webcast, just to kind of do a recap of here are the aha moments. So yes, these opportunities of what happened in the mitochondrial space sessions, we'll share with the entire patient community. But for the Mito and Autism session that is happening on Saturday morning, we will immediately be able to share that at the symposium with our patients and families. So Dr. Naviaux, if you want to share a little bit about that Saturday morning session too.
Sure. That's another really exciting connection between mitochondrial medicine and an area outside of classic mitochondrial medicine, but affects a growing number of children, is autism spectrum disorder. And so actually the UMDF deserves credit for having hosted the very first workshop on mitochondria and autism in 2010 at this very same resort at the Marriott Resort in Phoenix, in 2010, where it's the very first Saturday session on mitochondria and autism. And at that time, the CDC prevalence rates of autism were 1 in 88. Today, that rate is 1 in 44, and that's across the U.S. Averaged over 11 different states. But in California, it's risen to 1 in 25. So almost 4%, or one child per 25 in a classroom could have a diagnosis, carry a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And what's interesting is that although the primary forms of mitochondrial disease, the primary genetic forms, we can find only in about 5% of children with autism, mitochondrial dysfunction can be found in over 90%, okay, of children with autism. So it's a complicated form of mitochondrial dysfunction, but it's one that we're going to tackle head on at the symposium.
Dr. Haas, as you think back to those early 1995-96 symposium, I'm curious if you all were dreaming of having this kind of conversation today when we're talking about the effects of mitochondria in space. Like, I want to have an appreciation for how much has changed over that time in terms of what we're presenting these days.
Yeah, well, I don't think we'd really anticipated having a session on mitochondria in space at the time.
It was a softball question, but thanks for hitting it.
But what we were well aware of is the role of mitochondria in really common diseases. So Alzheimer's disease. At the time, actually, I was doing research in Parkinson's disease. So diabetes, heart disease, almost every neurodegenerative and degenerative disease that affect humans has a mitochondrial role in it, and that's an area of active research around the world. So from the very beginning, the symposium that we hosted at UCSD, we brought in cardiologists and nephrologists and people to talk about Alzheimer's disease and Parkinson's disease. And so we've been aware of this for a long time, and that fortunately the rest of the world has become aware of as well. And there's a lot of research going on in this area, which hopefully we've helped a little bit by drawing attention to mitochondria.
I can share a little anecdote from the early 2000s. So, we had read about 1999, Dr. Haas and I founded this Mitochondrial Medicine Society, but about the same time, the Mitochondrial Research Society was also being formed by Dr. Keshav Singh. And he and I got together, to try to, pave the way for a journal. It was called Mitochondrian. We were, of course, one of the important things for any new journal is to make sure that the National Library of Medicine is able to index every article that's published in the journal in PubMed. And we received a notification that, unfortunately, our request for indexing in PubMed had been denied. And so this was 2001, and the return was because there's no evidence that mitochondrial dysfunction plays a significant role in mainstream, medicine. Okay.
This was in 2000?
Yeah, that was 2000 about. And so we hatched this idea. Okay, what we need to do is put together a monograph. And so of head to toe, these are mitochondrial defects, from brain, eyes, heart, lungs, kidney, orthopedic medicine, endocrinology. And so I acted as the editor for a special issue. There was over 450 pages worth in the journal Mitochondrian on mitochondrial medicine. That shortly after that was published, we got news from the National Library of Medicine that the journal Mitochondrian will now be indexed in PubMed.
Fantastic! What a moment! What a milestone! If there's probably no greater proof of the advancement in research than the increased activity around clinical trials. Phil, we've been talking a lot about this at UMDF in terms of our efforts to catch up now, right? To establish this culture of clinical trials. And one of the things I'm really excited about is, one of the main entrees at Symposium this year is focused on clinical trial readiness, clinical trials updates. And I'm looking at that kind of Thursday afternoon, and then most of the day Friday. We're spending quite a bit of time on this. I thought maybe you could comment a little bit on what we're doing on that front at Symposium.
Yeah, again, full credit to the course chairs early on when Karen and I were discussing about the overarching goals, and clinical trial readiness came right to the top of the list of, we need to continue to make time in the program to talk about clinical trial readiness. And that means, how do we find the patients? How do we capture their perspective on it? How do we run more effective clinical trials? How do we design better clinical trials? So many, many elements to that. And the only way you can do that is to really kind of come at it from a lot of different directions. So excited about the program that we're pulling together Thursday afternoon, where we'll start out with a presentation that really demonstrates progress towards improved outcome measures for mitochondrial disease. And this will be absolutely critical for successful clinical trials and developing therapeutics in mitochondrial disease. We need better validated outcome measures. But then we want to hear sort of the regulatory landscape, rare disease in general. What can we learn from what other rare disease communities are facing? And we think these presentations will really set the stage then for the latter part of the day, where now we're going to focus on the voice of the patient. And this is a little bit like a mini version of our patient-focused drug development meeting that we ran back in 2019 together with the FDA. But it's an opportunity for more direct interaction from all the stakeholders in the community with patients. So Kara and I, working together with our support administrator, Margaret Moore, have identified a handful of patients and caregivers who will provide their perspective on the burden of the disease and what the idealized treatments look like, and what are burdens to participating in clinical trials, what excites them about participating in clinical trials. And we really want to focus on that clinical trial portion of the voice of the patient, and sort of tease that out so that we understand what is it that motivates the patients to participate in clinical research, but also what are the reasons why they're not or are hesitant to. So they're going to think about, what can we do about that? Right? What's actionable there? Is it an education matter? What can we do? So I think that will really come out of that Thursday session. And then we want to take that patient perspective into Friday morning. And I think you'll talk about some of the UMDF stuff that we're going to cover, as part of our normal Friday. But after that, we'll have separate breakout sessions that attempt to capture the clinician investigator perspective. Folks like Drs. Haas and Naviaux that are involved in clinical trials. What are the burdens for you, to running effective clinical trials? So what holds you back from being even more successful there, or what resources would help you be more successful? So we'll try to tease that out with, again, patients, industry, and clinicians all in the room together so that a very robust discussion can take place.
But then, all to chart a course for strategy, right? For solving these problems. That's what I'm most excited about it. I shouldn't pick a favorite session for Symposium. They're all wonderful, but I would be remiss to say that I'm not most excited about this voice of the patient session for many different reasons. We've seen the success of paneling our patients, particularly as we work with our regulator partners and make sure we're sharing the burden of the disease. But it's what drives our strategy at UMDF, hearing from the patient families. And I want to ask our docs on the call here, Dr. Haas, I'm going to turn to you. If you could just share with a little bit with our viewers how important the patient voice is to your daily work, to advancing what you do.
Well, it's critical. It's also really important to the FDA. Mm-hmm. So their focus more and more has been on involvement of patients and families, and actually trying to prove in clinical trials that it's benefiting the patient. So I think that is very important in what we do on a day-to-day basis, but also in terms of moving drug development forward. I just want to call out one really important thing, that I think the UMDF is incredibly lucky to have Phil Yeski as our scientific liaison and really scientific director, because he has done a tremendous amount of work in terms of interacting with pharmaceutical companies at an early development stage, but also later on in terms of clinical trials. He's just a wonderful spokesperson for the mitochondrial community. And I just didn't want to let that go without pointing
Very
out.
kind of you to say. Thank you.
No, it's very true. I mean, I don't think there are any other organizations that I know of that have people with your level of expertise in this area. So, so that's great. Yeah, we and Phil has been very helpful in trying to bring these pharmaceutical companies on board in terms of clinical trials and interacting with them. Actually, a very recent involvement that we have had is with one of the more severe, perhaps the most severe form of mitochondrial disease, Lee syndrome. And we just had a workshop which was European-led on this occasion, but Phil had a lot to do with the planning of that, as did a number of our physicians. We brought in there Matt Klein, who is running is really the director, medical director of a company called PTC that's running one of the clinical trials that actually I'm participating in. So it's kind of a big family, but we are all working together to really come up with some effective treatments, and hopefully that's going to bear fruit pretty soon.
Well, great way to describe it.
Brian, I love the fact that Dr. Haas used the word family there, right? Because that kind of speaks to culture, doesn't it? Right. And I think that's what we're really trying to, and like any family, right, there are going to be disagreements, and some parts of the family may not get as along with others, but we're all, we share the same mission, right? We're part of the same family. We have the same goals, and I think you really see that on display in mitochondrial disease. It's very heartening.
And Kara gets to plan the family reunion every year at Mitochondria 2022, right? It's interesting. I very much appreciate Dr. Haas sharing the kind words on Phil too, as a staff member of our team. I think that spirit is embodied in the entire UMDF staff, and it's also what happens at Symposium. I think one of the real special components of that event is you have the patient community, you have industry. Shout out to Matt Klein, who chairs our Industry Advisory Council. So many of you put in so many hours to help move this forward. That is an extension of our organization. We don't have the staff to be able to pull off everything that we do. We count on the unwavering support, those volunteer hours, those many hats that you all toss on. It's critical to moving this forward, and we're very grateful for that. I think we see that shine a little bit on that Friday programming too, Phil. I think about our Friday morning where one of my goals is to get up there to showcase impact. Yeah. And it's not really intended to be a UMDF as that organization based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania with 17 staff. UMDF are the legions of individuals who commit to this time to say, we're going to kick down some doors to take care of this problem. I was on with a doc the other day, and there was a conversation was popping up about when will you retire? And the phrase, what he said that really hit me hard was, there are people dying of this disease. You can't. Yeah. And that really hit me there. And I think about that, the seriousness of our work. And I'm proud to be able to showcase that at Symposium. That's what happens on Friday. So Friday morning is a little bit of a rah-rah of the good work that's been happening, some impact that UMDF, and part of that legion of support are the very donors who are funding these programs. right? I'd love to be a $50 million organization. If there's anybody out there who wants to make us a $50 million organization, but you get my email in the show notes. But we call us now. It's a telethon now. But we are a small but mighty organization that relies on those $50 checks, those corporate sponsorships. Shout out to all of our friends who are helping to underwrite the symposium this year. We're going to talk about that on Friday. What's making all these programs move, the generous support. Part of that is the grants that we give out every year. And I have to think 27 years ago, Dr. Naviaux, Dr. Haas, there wasn't a postdoc pitch competition live on stage where you give a 5-minute pitch and then donors get to vote. Like, that's pretty darn cool that we're doing that now. So real quick on that, you can check out umdf.org to learn more about our accelerators program. We'll be featuring that on Friday, where we bring the finalists of our postdoctoral fellow grant recipients to give their 5-minute pitch. And then our donors who give at least $500 or more throughout the year get to vote on the winner of that. Encourage everybody to tune in. Phil, I know you're going to be our host during that time.
Yeah, it's a third year now, right?
Yes,
third. They're all starting to blur together.
Fourth. This is the fourth. Sorry.
Yeah, we have made 3 awards, haven't we? Yeah, wow. So, here we are. But, again, we don't have finalists if not for the hard work of gentlemen, scholars like Dr. Haas, Dr. Naviaux, and many other members of our scientific and medical advisory board that we turn to for scientific peer review. Right? We're not putting forward candidates and proposals that aren't fundable scientifically. So the donor community can really feel comfortable and confident that these are vetted, right? And now it's what do you connect with? And it's really interesting. I think it's a great training experience for these postdoctoral fellows about how to be able to convey sometimes almost always complex technical research projects in a way that connects with a more lay audience and a lay audience that relates to the topic of the research. I think it's a beautiful marriage, right, of donor engagement and good funding, good science, and training the next generation of researchers in the field. And we all know we need a lot more activity to take place. There's plenty of work to be done inside mitochondrial research. So yeah, we'll look forward to getting to our 2022 winner coming out of that.
You're on par with segues today too, Phil. I was going to ask our guests today, what else does it take? When we think about charting a course for motivating the next generation to adopt mito as a field, I'd like to ask you, gentlemen, what do we need to be doing?
Well, the first thing that we've learned just through the history of medicine, if you have a treatment that works, more doctors will be aware of the disease.
Success brings success.
All the acolytes of Louis Pasteur couldn't get a job as infectious disease specialists until the first antibiotic came out. And you could, actually save a patient with pneumococcal pneumonia, with penicillin or one of the early, antibiotics. Then it became important for every physician to really accurately diagnose the disease. And so I think that's what will happen with mitochondrial medicine is that a great way to quantify the growth that has really been catalyzed a large part by the UMDF is, in 2001, there was not a single pharma company, not a single biotech dedicated to developing drugs to treat mitochondrial disease. And now we have over 12, and there may be more than that, and that is just a huge concrete, example of the impact that the UMDF has had on medicine around the world.
So focusing for a second on the grants program, the UMDF grants program, one of the factors we take into account in evaluating whether to fund a grant is the likelihood of funding from the NIH or some other major funding entity for this particular piece of research and this investigator. And we have had a lot of successes over the years in developing the scientific careers of people who now are really leaders in the field. So that's another real UMDF success. So we realize that we need to bring young people into the field because a lot of us are getting a little elderly now. And so the Gateway program, which was developed in conjunction with the NIH-funded NAMDAC, North American Mitochondrial Disease Consortium, is, I think, a good example of this. And what we're doing is supporting with small $5,000 grants young investigators or even people just at the early university level with a variety of different research programs and opportunities to keep them or get them and keep them interested in mitochondrial disease. And I think in the long run, that's going to turn out to bear a lot of fruit. This afternoon at 2 o'clock East Coast time, 5 o'clock East Coast time, 2 o'clock Pacific time, we have the presentations of the 5 recipients of the Gateway program from 2021. And the education committee is going to vote the 2 best ones who will receive $2,500 grants to come to the Phoenix meeting in June and present their work. So this is really focused on people just starting out their careers. And I think that's a great effort by the UMDF that we're very grateful for.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up. I know it's something, Phil, we've been working on, and I don't know if we'll have this ready in time for symposium, but when you start thinking about the follow-on funding, that kind of but for that UMDF investment, you know, where would they be today? I know it's something we're trying to do a better job of tracking because it's a nice stewardship opportunity for our donors to be able to say, you know, back 15 years ago, the UMDF made this initial investment, and look where the science has taken us, where this individual has gone today. That's something we should all be very proud of. It's the convergence of having excellent mentors, donors to fund those types of programs, and an organization that makes that commitment to do so.
Yeah, we of course have limited capabilities, financial resources, like any organization, like any family. Right. So we have to prioritize and allocate as best we can, and we're trying to stimulate as many options as possible. It's like planting seeds, and you know, not all of them are going to grow into plants or trees that that continue to to thrive. But our role is to plant the seeds and continue to advance the field. And whether it's through our direct grants or the Gateway to Mitochondrial Medicine grants that we do together with NAMDAC, they help advance that part of the mission.
Well, one way to kind of see this all come to life, I encourage any of our viewers who are attending Symposium to be sure to join us Friday evening for our Evening of Energy. This is really the showcase of impact, the recognition of these heroes in the research space. It's where we will actually be announcing the winner of the big pitch, that Accelerators Prize. So I encourage everybody to join us Friday evening. It's a very special moment for our organization. And sometimes we have to just take one of these, right? We have to take that big breath to say, yes, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, but we're doing good work. And it's important that we recognize that. So I encourage everybody who's going to be joining us at the symposium to be sure to join us Friday evening. Dr. Haas, Dr. Naviaux, before we let you get on your way to do all this good work, is there anything else that would be good to share with those that are tuning in?
I just want to, say thank you again to you, Brian and Kara and Phil, for all your work and heartfelt dedication to our family.
And I do too. I'd just like to point one other thing out, that the UMDF is taking a worldwide leadership role. So at the beginning, this was really just US based, but now we're reaching out all over the world. And this Lee's Symposium, for instance, workshop involved people from Australia and Japan, and of course, many representatives from Europe as well as the US. So we're really trying to develop, you are really trying to develop the mitochondrial community around the world.
Extended family.
There we go. We avoided the space puns, but we just filled that hole with family puns. Well, Dr. Haas, Dr. Naviaux, we're very grateful for your time today, and certainly beyond the hour you've spent with us today, all the time you've put into planning the Mitochondrial Medicine Symposium 2022. Clearly, we have an incredible program available for our community, and to take it another step, I should say, is it's not just this annual planning for a symposium. As we know, this is work that you all have put incredible time throughout your entire careers of advancing this. And it makes us feel really good that you are a part of our family and that we're part of yours. And it's important that we continue to share that message with our community.
Well, thank you so much, Brian and Kara and Phil.
Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Well, I have in my notes here the power of bringing patients, the medical, the clinical research community together. And it's what makes MitoMed so special. Yeah. But really what it makes it special are the people who come there, right? The gentlemen like Dr. Haas and Dr. Naviaux that have made our patients their priority.
Yeah, they absolutely have, over a significant component of their professional careers, and continue to. And we ask a lot of them and to help us, to make sure, to keep us on track and make sure that we're doing right by our donors, to focus on the best aspects of advancing the mission of UMDF. They don't say no very often, and we're really fortunate to have people like that have been part of our community for so long.
Kara, I know this is the real joy of your job. You share it with me all the time. The opportunity to work with these brilliant minds, with these doctors who give so much of their time and talent to us. And I know this year's no exception.
Absolutely not. And I found it interesting when Dr. Naviaux said he was a fellow, back ago sitting, and I'm like, well, now he's going to be that person, and he is every year at Symposium. He does. The buzz that happens at Symposium, you can hear all of that networking and that talking. So because there are a lot of postdocs and young researchers that come, and it's wonderful to have that core group like Drs. Haas and Naviaux and Cohen and all of them that have been around for a long time to really
maybe we should have them all do a pitch competition on stage. What do you think?
Yeah, maybe after the cash bar.
Yeah, there you go. There we go. Well, once again, special thanks to our guests today, Dr. Bob Naviaux and Dr. Richard Haas. Grateful for all the good work they're doing, and grateful for our community supporting us. Again, Mitochondrial Medicine 2022 registration is live. You can go to umdf.org and register. You can see some of the programming on there as well, too. Keep an eye on our social media. This is where we're constantly sharing updates. Of course, your health and safety is a priority as we plan for this year's event, but we're excited to be together. We're excited to share again and to see all of you. So follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. You can see all the great information there. And until next time, everybody, go fast.